Australia. I would like to thank the UWA Italian Club for having us here today. We're not lucky with the weather, we're still waiting for many participants to come. We have a day divided in two main sessions. The first one this morning will be in English, and we'll have several speakers talking about the Australian system on visas, skill assessment, fair work, and English language classes, and migration agents. So I would like to welcome our speakers for this morning, Mr. Robert Bailey and Ms. Emma Newman of the Department of Immigration and Citizenship, Mr. Andrew Jones, Assistant Director, Overseas Workers Team of the Fair Work Ombudsman, Mr. Ivan Ho, International Manager of the Western Australia and Northern Territory for VETASES, Ms. Angela Castro, Market Manager of Study Perth, and Ms. Josephine Buldempo of Casale Migration. I would like now to invite Mr. Robert Bailey of the Department of Immigration and Citizenship to talk for us about the visa system in Australia.
Thanks Adriana, and for giving us the opportunity to address the community. And thank you for attending, folks. Hopefully, I may be able to raise some questions for you. What I wanted to do, though, is just a broad overview of the department process that you can imagine. Hundreds of thousands of visas. Visas come in a couple of categories. There are temporary visas, student, visitor visas, some work and business visas. We also have permanent visas, or people wish to articulate from the temporary to the permanent. Wow, that's good. Thank you. So everyone can hear me, I would imagine, because I can hear you. Okay. So I'm going to just go through a range of the visas that we have on offer. I am available for questions during our question time, and I'm really going to have to get a move on because there is a lot of information, and I do tend to talk. At the moment, though, we've gone through some fairly significant changes. There have been changes in pricing. You may or may not be aware of that. We're also shrinking the number of visa subclasses and introducing streams within. So if you've been following the changes over the last year or two, you may have seen various visas disappear and new ones springing up in their place. So, we're looking at visitor visas. The 600 visa is now the all-encompassing one. People can come out on that particular visa to visit. They can do a little bit of study, or they can do business under that. The 601 ETA is an electronic travel authority. If you're from Italy, you can have your travel agent book that for you. You can't book that directly. The travel agent or handler can book it. The 651 is an e-visitor visa. You go online and you can book that. I'm going to stay in this area for just a few more slides. You can study on a visitor visa only up to 3 months. So if it's a formal PROCOS kind of course, you can't do it. But for odd courses here and there, you can actually undertake some sort of study. As far as businesses are concerned, we're pretty specific about this, the kind of rule that you can do. You can go to meetings and you can negotiate and go through all sorts of business structures like that. But what you can't do is you can't sell goods and you can't get involved in doing the day-to-day work and activities. It's a no-go. It's against the visa conditions that are applied for you if you come in on a 600 business visa. Student visas. I put the 3 most common ones there. 572 is more for the technical side of things, vocational lines. 573 is for your bachelor degree. 574, as it says, master's degrees. Under those 3 visa subclasses, the 572 and 573, I put it up there. You're able to work 40 hours a fortnight as a student. If you work more than that, you're in breach of visa conditions. We could cancel your visa and send you home. The 574, once a person has commenced their license, then the unlimited hours apply for them. If a person comes out on a spouse visa, once again, their spouse or any dependents who may be able to work are only allowed to work the 40 hours a fortnight. During semester breaks, student visas can work much longer than that, and at the end of their course, not before the course begins. So if they come to Australia, they haven't started their course, not eligible to work. It's an area that we're certainly policing now, and also since there are some employer sanctions legislation was introduced, and now it's being certainly more policed. We're going to the skilled visa area. The 457 is a temporary visa, it's uncapped. It requires an employer to sponsor somebody. It's prescribed by a list of occupations. We have a list called the Consolidated Sponsored Occupation List, which is available on our website. If the occupation is not on that list, it can't be sponsored by an employer. The department determines whether or not an employer will be able to sponsor somebody. We then look at the occupation that they're wishing to sponsor. Then we look at the applicant and see whether or not the applicant measures up to the requirements of the job that they're specified. We have a library of information held within an area called ANZCO, the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations. It's ANZSCO. They prescribe what an occupation does, the tasks, the title of the occupation. They also prescribe the educational requirements for that and experiential levels, and it also prescribes a skill level 1 through to 8. Labour agreements, I won't even go there at this point because it's not mainstream. Certainly regional sponsored migration and the employer nomination scheme are permanent sponsored programs. So an employer can sponsor somebody into Australia as a permanent resident through those schemes. The ENS, the 186 visa, is once again prescribed, and it goes back to the list that I talked about before, the Consolidated Sponsored Occupation List. If the occupation is not on that list, it can't be sponsored. We also have a fast streaming from the 457 visa into the permanent programs. If an employer is happy with their employee and is willing to sponsor them, after a couple of years on 457, we can fast stream their application through to permanent residence. The 187 is a regional visa, and up until a couple of years, Perth was not included in the prescribed regions. It now is, and it's a broader view of what occupations can actually be sponsored into Australia. We look, I mentioned ANZCO before, the ANZSCO, skill levels 1, 2 or 3. Okay, fair game. Any occupation in those 3 skill levels can be sponsored by an employer who's looking to bring somebody in. There are some steps that need to be gone through before that, but I won't go there. Down the bottom, skilled independent. These are, this falls within our General Skilled Migration Program. The General Skilled Migration Program is one that's based on points. So if a person is actually a qualified professional overseas, and in some instances, a person who's come here as an international student may also be able to access this. They score themselves with points that obviously have to be evidenced, otherwise people will make all sorts of outlandish claims. We determine a cut-off point. They put in an expression of interest if they meet. If they go above that cut-off point in terms of the points that they accrue, then they can put in this expression of interest. We, as a department, then invite the highest scorers in a particular occupation to lodge an application. It used to be that anybody who met the threshold points test could lodge an application. We had to deal with it. It left us with a trail about 12 years long of people wishing to apply, wishing to come into Australia, and we actually had to deal with their visa applications because every visa application must be resolved. Many, of course, were refused. But under this program, we select the best and the brightest, and
more often than not, people certainly get granted. So moving on, there's an area on our website called Skill Select. So if somebody has the skills, they can access all of our skill migration program through this particular thing. In a later slide, I'll show you where the link is on our screen, and it will take you to the full suite of general skill migration and employer-sponsored migration programs. But under this, the Skilled Independent is a visa for people who wish to sponsor themselves. And it allows them, once their visa is granted, they're a permanent resident in Australia. There's another visa subclass called the 190, which is a state or territory sponsored. Now, every state in Australia has its own migration kind of arm. They don't grant visas, but they are there to facilitate and provide backup support for anybody who's in an occupation that they wish to bring into the state. It will also afford an applicant further points. So if you wish to sponsor yourself in and you're only at 55 points, you could go to us in terms of your scoring. If you went to one of the state bodies and they wish to sponsor you, you could get 5 points. And that would meet the threshold of 60, which is the currently is at the moment. We can actually move that threshold up or down. If indeed the state says, look, we're willing to sponsor you, but we want you to go into a region in Western Australia, you could pick up 10 points. So there's a bit more flexibility and certainly some opportunities for people at that threshold area to boost their point levels and therefore increase their chances of being invited to apply. Beyond that, there are business skills visas and investment visas. These are ones for people who have obviously been good at business overseas. There's an opportunity for them if they wish to come into Australia, invest in a business and get that started. So I'm trying to cover as broad a range here as possible, and obviously it will narrow down when the questions come. But there also exists the opportunity for investors to get involved in this. Initially, these visas are provisional, and once all of the conditions are met within a prescribed time frame, the person then moves into a permanent residence visa. You may or may not have seen something in the press about the significant investor visa. It's for somebody who's got the spare $5 million to park for 5 years in bonds or a specified investment. And once again, those sorts of things, for that particular visa, there's no English requirement for it. Working holiday visas, these are actually a cultural exchange program. It's not a work visa, but it allows for somebody to work. And it's a visitor visa. You've got to be between 18 and 30, you only get one go at it. And it's a reciprocal arrangement between Australia and Italy. So in Australia, from 18 to 30, you can go to Italy, enjoy a year, and work a bit, and have a great holiday. What we have as an added incentive for people to come and they get their first 12-month working holiday maker visa. And if they work in a, down the bottom, it says can apply for a second one-year visa, if they meet the requirement. Now this requirement is that they work in regional Australia, and they work in either mining, construction or agriculture, and agriculture includes fishing, hurling and aquaculture. They work for 3 months there, they can apply to get a second 12-month visa. Throughout this period of time, you can only work for an employer for 6 months. At the end of that, you've got to either move on, or the employer may say, well, you've got the skill set that I require, it's the occupation that would be approved, and indeed if you had enough experience back home, possibly added to the experience that you picked up here, a sponsor may wish to, or an employer may wish to sponsor you here permanently. In the second year, you can actually go back and work for one of the original employers that you worked for in the first 6 months. So you could end up working for somebody for 12 months, but not consecutive. Family program. Now, there are a lot in this. Okay, and I don't want to pull them all apart, but certainly partner visas. We're looking at exclusive relationships between partners. Part of the subclass is both sex and same sex. We have onshore and offshore differentiations, i.e. that means that we're about 820 or 309. They're the first provisional visas that somebody will get and will need to meet the requirements to get the second, the /100/801, which are the permanent visas. So it's incumbent upon an applicant to be sponsored by an Australian permanent resident or citizen, and that they provide evidence of the ongoing relationship. That evidence requires financial and social, all of their community, their social ties. It has to be evidence. The process usually takes a couple of years. The provisional visa is granted first, and 2 years after that date of application, we look at the relationship again. So you're asked to provide evidence that the relationship is still solid and ongoing, and it's at that point that permanent residence is either granted or refused. The prospective marriage visa is if you wish to get married to somebody. You get one of these visas, and you've got to get married within 9 months of being granted. You don't have to come into Australia to get married. It's an offshore application. You can get married overseas, but once you're married, you then come into Australia and either lodge for the 820, or if you're offshore, you can lodge for the 309. The child is, in some instances, people don't include children, or something changes in the circumstances, and a child that was not going to be part of that spousal application, that partner application, comes about later. So that child can also be included in this. But also and that child visa is contingent upon that person being solely dependent or wholly dependent on the sponsor. They mustn't be in a relationship with anybody. They must never have been married. They can be up to 25 years of age. Adoption, somewhat similar. Orphan relative, dependent child, once again, all of these things relate back to not being in any sort of partnership relationship. They've got to be dependent, and they've got to be single entities. Then we get into the parent visas. A couple of different kinds. The 103 is offshore. The 103 is an offshore application. There is no age limit on that one. The 804 is 65. It's got to be at least 65. Then we've got the contributory areas in both of those. This is where you come along, and if you've got to spare $80,000 per applicant, and this is just off the top of my head, I haven't got the actual. We've changed our pricing to the point where it's so complex, you've got to pull apart the whole relationship and look at who is involved in the application before you can actually end up with a figure. But it is a very expensive way of coming in. However, the processing time is really short, because somebody could stay on a parent visa or an aged parent visa for 10 years, maybe longer before it's actually processed. So once again, a very long tail on that. The relative side of things, once again, the age-dependent relative and remaining relative, they cannot be in any other kind of relationship. They have to be single. And once again, also in that area with these age-dependent relatives, we're looking at balance of family as we do with parents. If somebody's trying to sponsor a son or a daughter who is married back home, it's not going to work because they're married into another family. If there is a single entity, they could be sponsored in. Once again, with the age-dependent relative and remaining relative, if they are married and in a relationship with another party, then they're not going to be eligible either. The carer subclass, is for people who have been to come out and care for usually a relative, but it has got a bit of a sting. There's an issue where they need to have a medical rating that's undertaken by and prescribed by the department of greater than 30. So if you've got an invalid relative who you think you might come out as their carer on call, that person would need to go through the process of being determined by us as being in need for this to actually take place. Now, I'm really skimming through this quickly because about 5 minutes or 2 minutes. Okay. Permanent residence. This is what you can do as a permanent resident. And you can also, at a point in time, you can actually apply for citizenship. But this is what's on offer for a person who becomes a permanent resident. Buy a house, and do all sorts of bits and pieces. So once you get your permanent residence visa, and it might have been more than 5 years ago, and the permanent resident visa allows you to move in and out of Australia as you wish. There comes a point in time where that visa sort of comes while you're in Australia. If you wish to travel and you're getting close to the end of your or the visa that you've already got has come to this end. You're still a permanent resident, but what you need is something to travel in and out of Australia. You get one of these visas, a 155 visa. So you might have come in under a skilled stream or a family stream or whatever, but so many years down the line, that visa itself, its value to you as a document to move in and out of Australia has gone. So this is what needs to happen, is to go on to a visa. So citizenship. I don't know if I have to read that to you, but it's pretty simple, but there is a test. A couple of minutes. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, give you about 30 seconds because I know I've got to move. Okay, this is what our website looks like at the moment. So if you're looking for a visa and you don't know what visa you're going to be eligible for, you can go through that, you see that blue box that says finding a visa, you click on there and it'll start to ask you questions. You answer those questions and gradually it narrows down to a group of visas that you may be eligible to apply for. So it's a really great tool to change those variables. But consider that whatever you put in there, and this is just front-ended, it doesn't release that information to us. So you might try various combinations just to see whether or not it's going to work for you. You would be required at the time that you apply to provide evidence that that is indeed the fact that you have put in there that's led you to it. So if you're claiming a particular qualification or something like that, you need the evidence to back that up. Where that circle is, it's got check work or visa entitlements. Just above it, the check the progress of your online lodged applications. These are extra facilities where if you click on those, that'll bounce you straight into a particular area. This thing that says VIVO, that's Visa Entitlement Verification Online. You can work out whether or not you've got work rights. You would have been advised whether or not you'd have work rights when you actually were granted your visa. Sometimes people forget. It also lets an employer know if you're applying for a job, whether or not you are lawfully able to take that job on, or if he's lawfully able to employ you, because we introduced some pretty serious sanctions and infringements and fines to deal with employers who take on people who are not eligible or have limited eligibility to work. And at the top of that list there, you can see skill select just under online services. So if it's the skilled line, by clicking on that, you'll get there very quickly. And there's some more information about how to make contact with us if you've got any queries. So it might be worth jotting that down. And look, I thank you for your attention. I'll pass the mic back to Adriana.